My name is Florence Whitmore. I'm 67 years old, a retired teacher from a small town in Ohio. I spent 31 years in the same classroom, teaching 5th grade to children who still send me Christmas cards. My late husband Kenneth and I paid off our house 23 years ago, celebrated with champagne on the front porch, and never owed anyone a penny after that. The house is modest. 3 bedrooms, yellow siding, a maple tree in the yard that Kenneth planted our first spring there. It's the only thing I have left of him now. So when my son-in-law walked into my living room Tuesday evening, grabbed the remote control from my hand, shut off my television mid-episode, and said, "Enough of this trash," and my daughter just sat there on the couch saying nothing, I knew something was very wrong. I felt it in my stomach. That sinking sensation you get when reality shifts beneath your feet. The next morning, I found something in the kitchen trash that made my hands shake so badly I had to sit down. I was halfway through my favorite detective show when Derek walked in. He didn't knock, didn't ask, just reached across me and grabbed the remote from my hand. The screen went black. "Enough of this trash," he said, his voice carrying that tone he used when explaining things to people he considered beneath him. "You're rotting your brain with this garbage." My daughter Natalie sat on the other end of the couch, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor. She didn't defend me. Didn't say a word. The room went quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the distant sound of cars passing on the street outside. I felt small suddenly, diminished in my own living room, in the house I'd owned for 42 years. When I calmly reached for the remote, Derek held it high above his head like I was a misbehaving child. He smiled when he did it. That smile told me everything I needed to know about what he really thought of me. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept replaying the scene in my head, Derek's condescending smile, Natalie's silence, the way he'd treated me like an inconvenience in my own home. At dawn, I came downstairs to make coffee and spotted something unusual in the kitchen trash can. An envelope with my bank's logo, partially crumpled but still visible beneath some paper towels. I pulled it out with careful fingers, my heart already beating faster. It wasn't junk mail. It was a refinancing notice. My house. My fully paid-off house that Kenneth and I had worked 3 decades to own free and clear. Refinanced. The paperwork showed a home equity line of credit for $180,000, opened 3 weeks ago. There had been no conversation with me. No discussion, no permission, no mention of it at all. My hands started shaking as I read the details, trying to understand how this could possibly be real. I found Derek in the guest room, still asleep at 8 in the morning. I knocked once, then walked in, holding the refinancing notice. "What is this?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He sat up slowly, running a hand through his hair, not looking particularly concerned. "Oh, relax, Florence. We just leveraged the equity. It's a smart investment strategy." I stared at him. "This is my house, Derek. How did you refinance my house?" He smiled that patronizing smile again. Natalie co-signed. She's the beneficiary on the deed, so technically she has a vested interest in the property's value. We're using the funds to expand my business. You should be thanking us. We're building generational wealth for the family. Natalie appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas, avoiding my eyes. She'd signed something. My own daughter had signed documents tied to my property without telling me. But how was that even possible? After they left for Derek's office, I went to my filing cabinet and pulled out my original property deed. My hands were still trembling slightly as I read through the legal language. There it was, a survivorship clause that Kenneth had added years ago. If anything happened to me, the house would automatically transfer to Natalie without going through probate. It was meant to protect her, to make things easier after I was gone. Instead, Derek had used that technicality to apply for a home equity line of credit through Natalie's future inherited interest. I called my bank and spoke to a manager who confirmed it reluctantly. Yes, because Natalie had a documented future ownership stake, and because I was over 65, they'd approved the line of credit with her signature alongside mine. "But I never signed anything," I said. The manager's silence spoke volumes. Derek had forged my signature, or convinced Natalie to forge it. Either way, it was done. I spent the afternoon researching Derek's business. He owned a restaurant downtown called Elevation, One of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and small plates that cost $30. He'd opened it 8 months ago with great fanfare, positioning himself as a visionary entrepreneur who was transforming the local dining scene. I'd been to the opening. Derek had made sure everyone knew he was the mastermind behind it all. Natalie had mentioned he was planning to expand, to open a second location across town. That's what the $180,000 was for, I realized. He was gambling with my home's equity to fund his restaurant dreams. That night, he turned off my television again. I was watching a documentary about World War II when he walked in, grabbed the remote, and clicked it off. "You wouldn't understand entrepreneurship, Florence," he said casually. "Some people build things. Others just consume content." The humiliation burned hotter than the refinancing discovery. This wasn't really about money anymore. It was about power and respect. Instead of confronting him, instead of yelling or making threats, I did something else. I scheduled a meeting with a real estate attorney named Thomas Brennan, someone I'd taught 30 years ago who now had his own practice. I brought every document I could find. The original deed, the refinancing notice, my bank statements, Kenneth's will, everything. Thomas spent an hour reviewing the paperwork while I sat quietly in his oak-paneled office, watching dust motes drift through afternoon sunlight. Finally, he looked up. "This is tricky, Florence. They didn't technically refinance the house. They opened a credit line attached to Natalie's inherited interest. But you still own the property outright, and you're still the sole decision-maker regarding the property itself." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "That means you have options. Real options." My pulse steadied for the first time in 2 days. "Tell me everything," I said. Thomas explained it carefully, drawing diagrams on a legal pad. The home equity line of credit was technically legal because Natalie had a documented future ownership interest. However, my signature had been forged, which was fraud. I could report it, press charges, but that would mean prosecuting my own daughter. The alternative was simpler and more elegant. "You're the current owner," Thomas said. "You have the right to sell the property at any time. If you sell, the credit line becomes immediately due and payable from the sale proceeds. Derek and Natalie would have no claim to any remaining equity." I sat back, processing this information. "So if I sold the house, the bank gets paid first from escrow. Whatever's left over is yours. They can't stop you, can't prevent the sale, can't do anything except watch it happen." For the first time since finding that envelope, I smiled. Thomas noticed. "You're thinking of something," he said. "Just exploring my options," I replied calmly. A former student of mine, a young woman named Sophia who'd been in my last 5th grade class before retirement, worked as a server at Elevation. We'd stayed loosely in touch over the years. She always sent me a card on Teacher Appreciation Day. I ran into her at the grocery store Thursday afternoon, and she looked uncomfortable when she recognized me. "Mrs. Whitmore, hi," she said quietly, glancing around like she was worried about being overheard. We talked for a few minutes before she leaned in close. "I probably shouldn't tell you this, but the restaurant is struggling. We're months behind with suppliers. Some of the kitchen staff haven't been paid in 3 weeks. Derek keeps saying it's temporary, that a big expansion will solve everything, but..." She trailed off, looking guilty for sharing information. I squeezed her hand gently. "Thank you for telling me, Sophia. You're not betraying anyone, you're helping me understand the truth. Derek wasn't just reckless. His entire restaurant operation was actively sinking, and he'd used my house as a life raft." Friday morning, my bank called me directly. A woman from the loan department, her voice professionally concerned, asked if I was aware that payments on the home equity line of credit were coming due. "Due? Already?" I asked, genuinely surprised. "The grace period ends in 2 weeks, Mrs. Whitmore. Monthly payments of approximately $3,000 will begin then." $3,000. On a credit line I never authorized, for a business I had nothing to do with. "Has anyone made arrangements for these payments?" I asked. Long pause. "We were under the impression your daughter would be handling that." But Natalie couldn't handle it. She worked part-time as a yoga instructor, making maybe $30,000 a year. Derek had apparently assumed she'd cover it somehow, or perhaps he'd planned to make payments from restaurant profits that weren't materializing. The bank representative sounded genuinely nervous now. If payments aren't made, Mrs. Whitmore, we'll have to take action. This is secured debt against your property. I didn't scream or throw things or make dramatic accusations. Instead, I picked up the phone and called the bank back, asking to speak with the same loan officer. I have a question, I said calmly. What would happen if I decided to sell the house? Silence on the other end. Papers rustling. Then, if you sell the property, the home equity line of credit would become immediately due and payable in full. It would be paid from escrow as part of the closing. And I have the right to sell whenever I choose? Yes, ma'am. You're the sole owner of record. You can sell at any time. Thank you, I said. That's very helpful information. I hung up and sat very still, thinking through every angle. Derek had gambled my security on his failing business. Now I was going to call his bluff. And I was going to win. That evening at dinner, I waited until everyone had food on their plates before I folded my napkin carefully and set it beside my plate. I've made a decision, I said quietly. I'm selling the house. Derek stopped with his fork halfway to his mouth. Then he laughed, a loud barking sound that had no humor in it. You can't be serious. I looked at him steadily, my face calm. I am completely serious. I've already contacted a real estate agent. The house will be listed next week. Natalie's face went white. Mom, wait. We need to talk about this. We can talk, I said. But my decision is made. I'm 67 years old, and this house is too much for me to maintain alone. I'm selling it and moving into a senior living community where I won't have to worry about repairs or yard work. Derek's smile had vanished. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked genuinely nervous. Florence, that's a major decision. You can't just, I can, I interrupted gently. And I am. Later that night, long after Derek had stormed out, Natalie came to my bedroom. Her eyes were red from crying, mascara smudged beneath her lashes. She sat on the edge of my bed like she used to when she was young and troubled by something at school. He told me it would just be temporary, she whispered. He said you'd never even notice, that we'd pay everything back before you knew about it. He promised the restaurant was going to be huge, that we'd be able to pay off the entire line of credit within a year. I took her hand, feeling how cold her fingers were. But you knew it was wrong, didn't you? You knew you should have talked to me first. She nodded miserably. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. He just kept saying we needed to think bigger, that you were too risk-averse to understand real opportunity. And I wanted to believe him because he's your husband, I finished softly. I understand. But understanding didn't change what needed to happen. Derek had manipulated her, yes. But she'd let him. And now we all had to face the consequences. The for sale sign went up the following Tuesday. I hired the best real estate agent in town, a woman named Carolyn who'd sold houses in the neighborhood for 30 years. She was professional, efficient, and utterly discreet. The sign was elegant and understated, just the agency logo and a phone number. Within hours, neighbors started calling, asking questions. Was I okay? Did I need help? Where was I going? I answered politely but vaguely. Yes, I was fine. No, I didn't need help. Just downsizing, I explained. Time to simplify my life. Derek exploded when he came home and saw it. You're ruining everything, he shouted in my driveway, his face flushed with anger. This is our future. Natalie's inheritance. You can't just throw it away because you're being stubborn. I stood on my front porch, arms crossed calmly. This is my house, Derek. My name on the deed. My decision to make. The credit line will be paid from the sale proceeds. You'll get nothing. Not a dollar. His mouth opened and closed wordlessly. He genuinely hadn't believed I'd do it. The first showing happened Thursday afternoon. I'd cleaned the house meticulously, arranged fresh flowers in the living room, baked cookies so the place smelled warm and inviting, all the tricks Carolyn recommended. A retired couple named the Harrisons walked through slowly, admiring the hardwood floors Kenneth and I had refinished ourselves, the built-in bookshelves he'd constructed by hand, the garden where I'd grown tomatoes every summer for 40 years. They made a full-price offer that evening. Cash. No contingencies. 30-day close. Carolyn called me with barely contained excitement. Florence, this is the cleanest offer I've seen all year. They love the house. They're ready to move immediately. I accepted on the spot. When I told Derek and Natalie at dinner, Derek's face went absolutely white. He'd been operating on the assumption that I was bluffing, that I'd never actually go through with it. Now reality was crashing down. "You're really doing this," he said numbly. "Yes," I replied simply. "I really am." Derek cornered me in the hallway the next morning, his voice low and threatening. "If you sell this house, Florence, we're finished. Natalie and I will cut you out completely. You'll never see your grandchildren." I didn't have grandchildren yet, but the threat was clear. I looked at him steadily, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The manipulation, the entitlement, the complete absence of respect for anyone who didn't serve his purposes. "Derek," I said softly, "I think we're already finished. You just haven't realized it yet." He opened his mouth to argue, but I stepped past him and walked away. I had nothing more to say to him. The time for conversation had passed. Now there were only consequences, delivered with the same calm I'd used in my classroom for 31 years. Firm, fair, final, and utterly unmovable once the line had been crossed. I spent the weekend organizing documents, and on Monday I did something Derek would never expect. I handed him a folder across the kitchen table. "What's this?" he asked suspiciously. "Public records," I said calmly. "I thought you should see them." Inside was documentation I'd gathered methodically over the past week. Missed payment notices from restaurant suppliers. Business license violations filed with the city. Health inspection reports showing multiple code violations at Elevation. Angry reviews from customers complaining about service issues and food quality. Tax liens from the state. Everything was public record, legally obtained, meticulously organized. Derek's hands shook as he flipped through the pages. His empire, his vision, his grand entrepreneurial dream, it was all crumbling, documented in black and white. "Where did you get this?" he demanded. "I told you. Public records. Anyone can access them. I'm just the first person who bothered to look." His face flushed with anger and humiliation. The carefully maintained image of success was shattering, and he couldn't stop it. I sat Natalie down that afternoon while Derek was at the restaurant. I didn't yell or lecture. I simply spread out the same documents on the dining room table and let her see everything. The overdue payments. The violations. The angry suppliers threatening to sue. The employees who hadn't been paid. The credit card debt Derek had hidden from her, over $60,000 on cards she didn't know existed. She stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. Her hands trembled as she picked up a notice from the health department, dated 3 weeks ago, citing the restaurant for multiple serious violations. "He told me business was great," she whispered. "He said we just needed the expansion to really take off." "I know what he told you," I said gently. "But here's what's actually true." I showed her the bank statements, the payment schedules, the timeline of disaster that Derek had been hiding. Her marriage wasn't ambitious. It was reckless, built on lies and sustained by manipulation. And my house had become collateral damage in Derek's fantasy. The bank called Derek directly on Wednesday, and I listened from the kitchen as he paced in the living room, his voice rising with each sentence. They were freezing the home equity line of credit immediately. No further draws would be allowed. The existing balance was being called due within 30 days because of missed payments and irregularities in the application process, which meant they discovered the forged signature. Derek's expansion plans evaporated in that phone call. Without access to more funds, without the capital he'd been counting on, the second restaurant location was impossible. By Thursday, suppliers had started pulling out of Elevation entirely. One of the major food distributors terminated their contract, demanding payment in full for past due invoices. The kitchen couldn't operate without supplies. By Friday afternoon, Derek had no choice. He closed Elevation's doors. 6 months of operation, hundreds of thousands of dollars invested, and my home equity line tapped out, all gone. He blamed everyone. The economy, the suppliers, the bank, me, everyone except himself. Closing day arrived on a clear Tuesday morning in late October. I drove to the title company alone, my documents organized in a leather folder Kenneth had given me years ago. The Harrisons were already there, excited and nervous about their new home. We signed papers for 90 minutes. The title officer explained each document carefully, making sure everyone understood. When we reached the settlement statement, I saw the numbers clearly. Sale price, $340,000. Home equity line of credit payoff, $182,000, including fees and penalties. Closing costs and agent fees, $23,000. Net proceeds to me, $135,000. Derek received nothing. Not a single dollar. The credit line was paid directly from escrow. The debt erased. His access to my equity terminated permanently. I signed my name on the final document, and just like that, the house Kenneth and I had built our life in belonged to someone else. I felt sadness, yes, but also relief, and something that felt surprisingly like freedom. I moved into Riverside Senior Living the following week. It was a beautiful community on the edge of town, overlooking a tree-lined river. My apartment had 2 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a private balcony. Downstairs, residents had access to a library, a fitness center, a garden patio, and a home theater room with a massive screen and comfortable recliners. Derek had mocked my television habit, called my detective shows trash, treated my simple pleasures with contempt. Now I had a home theater room where I could watch whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, with nobody to judge or interrupt. I brought my favorite recliner from the old house, arranged my books on new shelves, hung Kenneth's photographs on the walls. My new place was smaller, simpler, easier to maintain. And it was mine, completely, legally, irrevocably mine. No hidden debts. No forged signatures. No son-in-law gambling with my security. Just peace and quiet and the life I'd earned through decades of hard work. Natalie filed for separation in November. She came to my apartment to tell me in person, her eyes hollow with exhaustion. I found more, she said quietly. More credit cards. More loans. More lies. He'd been hiding debt for years, Florence. Our entire marriage was built on money we didn't have and promises he couldn't keep. She'd contacted a divorce attorney, someone who specialized in cases involving financial fraud. Derek had apparently taken out loans in her name, opened credit cards using her information, forged her signature on documents just like he'd forged mine. The debt was catastrophic, over $200,000 that Natalie never knew existed. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered. "You were right. About everything. And I should have listened." I held her while she cried, feeling the weight of her regret and shame. She'd made terrible choices, trusted the wrong person, let herself be manipulated. But she was my daughter, and she was finally seeing clearly. Derek showed up at my apartment 3 weeks later. I saw him through the peephole, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes, looking smaller somehow than he had before. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "What do you want, Derek?" He tried to smile, that charming expression he used when he needed something. "Florence, I know we've had our differences, but I'm in a tough spot right now. I just need a small loan to get back on my feet. Maybe $20,000. I'll pay you back with interest as soon as—" "No," I said simply. His smile faltered. "Come on, Florence. You got $135,000 from the house sale. You can spare." "Enough of this trash," I interrupted, using his own words from that night he'd turned off my television. His face flushed. "What?" "You heard me. Enough. I'm done with your manipulation, your entitlement, your complete disrespect for everyone around you. You gambled with my security and lost. Now live with the consequences." I closed the door gently but firmly. Through the wood, I heard him say something else, but I was already walking away. I had a detective show to watch. Months passed quietly. Winter turned to spring. Natalie rebuilt her life slowly, methodically. She filed for bankruptcy to discharge Derek's fraudulent debt, moved into a small apartment, picked up more yoga classes. We had lunch every Sunday, careful conversations where we navigated the damage and slowly found our way back to each other. One afternoon in April, she looked at me across the table at our favorite cafe. "If you hadn't sold the house," she said slowly, "I'd still be blind. Still making excuses for him. Still letting him destroy everything." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "You saved me, Mom." I didn't see it then, but I see it now. She started therapy, joined a support group for people recovering from financial abuse, began rebuilding her credit score point by point. Her confidence returned gradually. Her spine strengthened. She was becoming herself again. Not Derek's wife, not the daughter who'd betrayed my trust, just Natalie. Flawed, human learning. I was proud of her in a way I hadn't been in years. I sit in my favorite recliner on a Thursday evening, remote control in my hand, volume set exactly how I like it. My detective show plays on the large screen, a murder mystery set in a small English village, the kind of program Derek called trash. Outside my window, the river reflects sunset colors, orange and pink and gold. Ducks glide past information. The garden patio below is filled with residents reading and chatting. This place is peaceful in ways the old house never was toward the end. I lost the house Kenneth and I built together, yes. I lost the maple tree he planted, the rooms where we raised Natalie, the garden where we grew tomatoes. Those losses are real, and I honor them. But I kept something more important. I kept my dignity. I kept my self-respect. I kept my right to make decisions about my own life without manipulation or contempt. And those things? Those were never up for refinancing. The credits roll on my show. I pick up the remote and start the next episode. Nobody interrupts. Nobody judges. Nobody tells me what I can or cannot watch in my own home. And that, I realize, is exactly the happy ending I needed. Not dramatic revenge. Not destruction. Just peace. Just freedom. Just me, in control of my own life again. Finally.